So what do we do if our vote doesn't count, if Donald Trump prevents us from voting in November or somehow screws with the election? Check this out, leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Is Donald Trump going to stop us from voting in November, or is he going to mess with the vote? As you know, I've been saying for some time, I think that I personally believe that their strategy is to use the 12th Amendment, which says that if enough states can't certify their vote as being legitimate, their electoral college vote, then the electoral college vote is set aside and the House of Representatives decides who's president, each state having one vote. So there would be 50 states, 50 votes. You've got 30. Oh, and the people in the states who decide the vote are the members of the combined Senate and House or Assembly or whatever they may call it. And I think that there are 33 or 34 states that are Republican controlled, which means that Donald Trump gets reelected. I've got to write another op-ed about this because it's just so clear to me that this is the direction they're moving. But today is the anniversary of the 1989 crushing of democracy and dissent in Tiananmen Square in China. And right now we're seeing in Hong Kong, where this year, for the very first time, protests have been outlawed, or demonstrations, whatever you may want to call that, in solidarity with those folks, have been outlawed. But protesters are doing it anyway. This anniversary is happening in the midst of a week in which the President of the United States has militarized Washington, D.C., and is calling for the crushing of dissent here in the United States. And I mean, literally nothing less than the crushing of dissent. It is to call it truly extraordinary, I think, frankly, is a pretty radical understatement. The Trump campaign has announced a Army for Trump website where they're selling camo hats, and Donald Trump sent me an email this morning in which he basically said that we've got to crush the left. I mean, this should be a wake-up call to all Americans. Fox News and Senator Thom Cotton in the New York Times, which, by the way, has caused a whole bunch of New York Times reporters and op-ed writers to tweet that they are ashamed of their own newspaper that it published Thom Cotton's op-ed, and did so without attaching the ability of readers to comment. Fox News and Senator Thom Cotton are openly promoting, what I call fascism here in the United States. Obviously, they're not calling it that, but I don't know how else you describe it. And while there are a few dissenting voices, the White House, the Republicans in the United States Senate, the conservative judges in the federal judiciary, they all seem to say, oh, this is fine with us. In fact, double down, as Thom Cotton is doing. America has arrived at a crisis point. And frankly, I don't think we're quite there yet. You've got Donald Trump right now is building a wall around the White House. I mean, maybe he's finally building a wall that Mexico will pay for. But as he is doing this, our democracy is literally at risk, to the extent that it's still a democracy and not an oligarchy. And I think the next 6 months are going to determine whether this democratic republic survives or goes the way of other authoritarian regimes have in recent years. Erdogan's Turkey, Bolsonaro's Brazil, Duda's Poland, Orban's Hungary, or even, a frightening echo of Europe in the early 20th century. Mussolini's rise to power was people tend to think that Mussolini followed Hitler. No, Mussolini preceded Hitler. Mussolini rose to power in the late 20s. With the word fascism. He didn't invent the word, but he claimed to have invented the word. Do you think that our votes will be counted this fall? I am very concerned. Or do you think that it's possible that Donald Trump is going to succeed in crushing democracy? There are, a number of pieces around this. I mentioned Tiananmen Square. The Chinese Communist Party is pushing this new law, or actually has approved this new law that basically cracks down on anybody in China who speaks up. Jimmy Carter, former president of the United States, just came out. He's 95 years old. He said, "We need a government as good as its people. We are better than this." The Secretary of the Army. Now, right now, there was a piece in the Washington Post this morning about how after Mark Esper, the Secretary of the Secretary of Defense, came out and said, "No, I don't think we should invoke." The Insurrection Act. I mean, basically, that and other things. I mean, basically, he pushed back on Trump, and then he walked back his pushback, but still Trump is running around going, "Okay, that's it. We got to pull a plug on this guy. We got to get rid of him." Well, the Secretary of the Army, who works for the Secretary of Defense, you've got each of the branches, the Navy, the Air Force, etc. This guy's name is Ryan McCarthy. And he tweeted this morning, wrote a letter, but it came out it was a tweet. Yeah, it's a tweet. He said, "Every soldier and department of the Army civilian swears an oath to support and defend the Constitution. That includes the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances." Now, this was at the same time that Donald Trump was tweeting, "You would think that the killers, terrorists, arsonists, anarchists, thugs, hoodlums, looters, Antifa, and others would be the nicest, kindest, most wonderful people in the whole wide world. No, they are what they are, very bad for our country." Right. Meanwhile, the former Secretary of Defense, General Mattis, has published basically an open letter. He says, "We must reject any thinking of our cities as a battle space," which is how Esper had described them 3-4 days ago in a conference call with governors. "We must reject any thinking of our cities as a battle space that our uniformed military is called upon to dominate." That was another, quoting Esper. He says, "Militarizing our response sets up a conflict, a false conflict, between the military and civilian society. It erodes the moral ground that ensures a trusted bond between men and women in uniform and the society they are sworn to protect and of which they themselves are a part." He quotes James Madison from Federalist 14. "America united with a handful of troops or without a single soldier exhibits a more forbidding posture to foreign ambition than America disunited with 100,000 veterans ready for combat," which is where we're at now. Back to General Mattis. "Instructions given by the military departments to our troops before the Normandy invasion reminded soldiers that, quote, the Nazi slogan for destroying us was divide and conquer. Our American answer is in union there is strength." He goes on to say, "Donald Trump is the first president in my lifetime who does not try to unite the American people, does not even pretend to try. Instead, he tries to divide us. We are witnessing the consequences of 3 years of this deliberate effort." Well, I would respectfully disagree with the general. I would say that was Richard Nixon's strategy and that was Ronald Reagan's strategy. The thing is, they did it with somewhat less violence. Nixon, look at how he dealt with the anti-war protesters and civil rights protesters. But Mattis goes on to say, "We must reject and hold accountable those in office who would make a mockery of our Constitution."